I do not know how many of you have actually seen the poster for Atma Bodha which was sent. And that book is okay, but I'm talking about the WhatsApp poster that has been sent. If you have seen the title of the program, the title of the program says Atma Bodha, an intuitive appreciation. Janaki Ramji had actually sent me a WhatsApp message about 1.5 hours or 2 hours earlier, asking me to specify or give at the beginning itself the difference between Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha. I request other participants to mute themselves. Anuji and Beenaji also.
Yes.
And Govindji, they have to mute themselves so that there is no disturbance. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Krishnapalji, can I just say one thing? Can we
Yes.
have a few more people put on their videos, please? It's very disgusting to talk to a blank screen, meaning just with initials on it. So whoever can put on their videos.
If your bandwidth is good, and if you are operating from your home with a good Wi-Fi connection, I think you can switch on your videos and switch off the audio, so that we can have a much more interactive session.
Right.
Okay.
Krishnapalji, I don't know whether you received, we all have received a WhatsApp, I think, saying that today is a very auspicious day to start something new.
Yeah, that's good for us in a way. That is good. But from a spiritual point of view, every day is a good day.
Every day is auspicious.
Yeah, so it's how we look at the day. And maybe today the greater forces in nature and the universe are also, in conjunction to help us and become a better place. The world would become a better place. So that's nice. Yeah, I'm yet to see a few more faces. If it's possible, if you can switch on your videos, I'll be thankful. Thank you, Janaki Ramji. And as I said, about 1.5 hours or 2 hours back, Janaki Ramji had sent me a message requesting to, tell us what is the difference and what is the this thing between the Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha. In fact, I wanted to start it with a brief recapitulation of the Tattva Bodha to begin with today. And as I mentioned, if you have seen the title of today's program, or the what we are going to discuss from now onwards on Atma Bodha, the title says Atma Bodha, an intuitive appreciation. Yeah, it's okay. If somebody's camera is not working, that's fine. But if if the bandwidth is okay, there's no problem. So this is going to be an intuitive appreciation. Coming to the basic difference between Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha, we have to understand that Tattva Bodha is an intellectual appreciation. Tattva Bodha is an intellectual appreciation which lays the foundation for the study of Vedanta. For the study of Vedanta, Tattva Bodha lays a beautiful foundation for us. And I'll just briefly recapitulate what the Tattva Bodha actually starts with and tells us about, and how it gives clarity on several of the fundamental aspects of Vedanta. For instance, the Tattva Bodha starts with the mention of the sadhana chatushtaya, or the fourfold discipline, which is viveka, vairagya, shat sampatti, and mumukshutva. Then it goes on to tell us that what is being imparted through this whole process of Tattva Bodha is Tattva Viveka, the discrimination of the essence. How do we look at the whole thing and derive the essence of any subject through our discriminatory faculty. Then it very briefly at the very beginning itself tells us about what the Atma is. Very briefly, in one statement, it says that the Atma is something which is other than the three bodies, other than the five sheaths, and other than the three states of consciousness. That means it is something beyond these things, beyond the three bodies, that is the Sthula, Sukshma and Karana Shariras, and beyond the five sheaths or koshas, which are the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya koshas. And it is also beyond the three states of consciousness, which are called as the Avasthatraya, which is the Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti Avasthas. So it is beyond these three. It's not defining anything positively. It's only mentioning that it is something beyond this, and it is generally represented in manifestation through three aspects, which are called as Sat, Chit and Ananda. Then from there, it goes on to take up each of these issues, each of the aspects. Like, for example, it takes up the definition and the formation of the three bodies. What is the Sthula Sharira? What is the Sukshma Sharira? What is the Karana Sharira? So each one it goes on to describe. The Sthula Sharira goes along with its 6 modifications of Asti, Jayate, Vardhate, Viparinamate, Kshiyate and Vinasyate. That means it talks about existence, birth, growth, change, decay and death. This is the aspect related to the physical body. Similarly, it talks about the subtle body, Sukshma Sharira, composed of 5 karmendriyas, 5 jnanendriyas, pancha pranas, and the manas and buddhi. These are the 17 aspects dealt with there. Then it goes on to talk about the Karana Sharira. The Karana Sharira, very interestingly, it is mentioned that it is Avidya Rupa. It is a manifestation based on the primordial ignorance or avidya. Then it talks about the avasthatraya. As I said, what is Jagrat Avastha, what is Swapna Avastha, what is Sushupti Avastha. I am deliberately using only the Sanskrit terms so that we familiarize ourselves with these terms and not use the English terms. Because English, though a very good language, has certain limitations when it comes to translating the scriptures, which have much deeper meaning, and intuitively we can connect better to the Sanskrit terms, and it is important that we try to remember in terms of the Sanskrit terms only. So it is Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti Avasthas. Then it goes to the Pancha Koshas. What is the Annamaya Kosha? What is the Pranamaya Kosha? What is the Manomaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha? Then after this, it again comes to the further elaboration on the term Atma, which is again, an aspect of the divinity or Brahman, which has these 3 constituents of Sat, Chit and Ananda. So it goes on to define and explain what Sat means, what Chit means, and what Ananda means. After this, Vedanta, which has taken a lot of technical aspects from Sankhya Yoga or the Sankhya philosophy, talks about the 24 tattvas. the 24 or Chaturvimshati, 24 aspects, which are the 5 elements, Pancha Mahabhutas, Pancha Jnanendriyas, Pancha Karmendriyas, Pancha Tanmatras. Then the 4 aspects which constitute what is called as the Antahkarana, the Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara and Chitta. So 5 into 4, 20, 20 plus 4, 24. These are the Chaturvimshati aspects of it, the 24 aspects of it. Then it goes on to describe what is the Antahkarana. As we said, Antahkarana is Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara and Chitta. And to remember it easily, I think Janaki Ramji has coined the word MBA Calcutta, MBAC. So MBA Calcutta is Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara and Chitta. Okay. Then it talks about what is called as Panchikarana. Panchikarana, as I mentioned to you earlier, is a technical term. So Panchikarana is a technical process where the formation of the 5 elements and coming from the subtler aspects of the element, they will come down to the grossest elements, which we see as the Prithvi, Apas, Teja, Vayu and Akasha. The gross elements which come from the subtler elements, the Panchikarana process. Then it talks about the 3 most important aspects, which is the Jiva, Ishvara and Brahma. This is a very important thing to be remembered. Atman, when it is embodied, is called Jiva. Please, let us be very, very clear in our mind what Jiva means. When the Atman or that principle which is connected to the highest, the Brahman, when it is embodied, when it is acquires a set of bodies, then it becomes Jiva. And Brahman, when associated with Maya through the purest form of the gunas, is called as Ishvara. See, you can say that the Ishvara is a link between Brahman and Jiva. He is an intermediary. He is in manifestation, but not of manifestation. That is Ishvara. Ishvara is in manifestation, associated with Maya, but he is also conscious of his connection to the Brahman. Maya, before it brings everything into entanglement through the 3 gunas, is connected to this aspect of Ishvara also. So, as I said, Ishvara is a link between the Brahman and the Jiva. This is an interesting thing which we have to remember as to how Vedanta develops the whole structure. Then it goes on to talk about how the Jiva and the Ishvara are not separate and different, because there is what is called as a descriptive aspect of it and what is called as an essential aspect of it. The descriptive aspect of Jiva makes us feel and appears as though it is different from Ishvara, but essentially it is one and the same, and there is no contradiction between these two. The only thing to be remembered is that the Jiva is in total ignorance, whereas Ishvara is not in ignorance but linked to Maya. Sometimes they say that Ishvara, being in manifestation, is in some form linked to ignorance also, but not so from an esoteric point of view. So you see, therefore they talk about the Vachyartha and Lakshyartha. I would request you to go through the text of Tattvabodha once again, so that you get a lot of clarity into these things. And therefore, based on this aspect, it talks about the Mahavakya Tattvamasi and then tells us who is a Jivan Mukta. And finally, it talks about the three types of karma: the Sanchita, Prarabdha, and Agami karma. And it ends on the note that whoever knows the self, Atmavit, he will cross over to the other side. That means he will be liberated from bondage and suffering. Tarati Shok Atmavit, Shokam Atmavit. Tarati Shokam Atmavit is an Upanishadic statement, a beautiful statement which talks about it. So this very briefly is a summary of what are all the aspects we have covered in the Tattvabodha. I would like you to go through the Tattvabodha text and maybe if you have the time, listen to the videos that are uploaded so that there is clarity on these aspects. So that the fundamental aspect is that Tattvabodha gives us a beautiful structural and functional system on which Vedanta is based. And it is, as I said, an intellectual appreciation. But spiritual development or spiritual progress is not about intellectual development, intellectual understanding. That's not sufficient at all. It is necessary, but not sufficient. What is required is an intuitive appreciation of this whole thing. And that is where Atmabodha comes into picture. Tattvabodha talks about the essential aspects of Vedanta, whereas Atmabodha directly talks about the journey of self-discovery. This is a journey of self-realization. What is called as the self-knowledge here. Atmabodha refers to self-knowledge, but I'm not very comfortable with the term knowledge, and therefore I would prefer to use the term self-awareness. Self-awareness could be a better translation of the term Atmabodha. And what is that awareness? Right at the beginning, we need to have this clarity that Atmabodha is awareness of the oneness of Atman and Brahman. The awareness of the oneness of the Atman and the Brahman, what does it do? It brings about an end to all bondage and suffering. That's what we mean by liberation or moksha or nirvana, or whatever term you use. These are all only terms. But essentially, one needs to be aware of oneself in truth. What is that truth? The truth is the oneness of Atman and Brahman. The individual aspect of one's own being and the universal being or universal consciousness are not two different things, but they are essentially one and the same. The identity of Atman and Brahman is what is to be understood through self-awareness or Atmabodha. This is the fundamental thing. Why? The why part of it is clarified at the beginning itself. It says this awareness will free one from all ignorance and therefore all bondage and suffering. In another context, I was discussing about this aspect of avidya, kama, and karma. See, out of ignorance, desire is born. Because ignorance is limitation. Limitation creates craving. It creates a sense of lack, a sense of inadequacy, a sense of being unfulfilled, something missing. That generates a lot of desire for that fulfillment, desire for that satisfaction, desire for pleasure, desire for what we call as happiness, whatever is there, the root is that. And therefore, that desire prompts you into action, karma. Because the basis of both kama and karma is avidya, karma can never lead one to liberation. Karma, by definition, being based on desire and ignorance, cannot be a means to liberation in any manner whatsoever. So what is the only means that is available is jnana, bodha, which is awareness. So self-knowledge, why they call it as self-knowledge is a translation of the term jnana. I don't want to use the term knowledge because knowledge refers to more mundane aspects. It is the wisdom aspect of it. It is the intelligence aspect of it. It is the awareness aspect of it. So once we understand that both desire and action are born out of ignorance, what is important for us is to remove that veil of ignorance. Removing the veil of ignorance is jnana. Ending of ajnana. Ending of that ignorance. So that is what is the purpose. See, the whole thing is directed towards that. So that is what is Atma Bodha is all about. And it starts at a very, higher level. The whole thing, right from this is in the form of verses. Atma Bodha is in the form of verses, and there are 68 verses in all. So it's a small text. It's a small text with 68 verses. We are going to go through all of the 68 verses carefully and look at it. Now, another point which I want to make very clear from a definitional point of view. So whenever we talk about Atman, I have given earlier the analogy of the Atman being an undetached spark of the flame which we call as Brahman. All these are actually words only, but these words, we should go use the words and transcend the words and try to get a firm understanding of the whole concept of Atman and Brahman. Now, when it comes to Brahman, it is transcendental. What do we mean by transcendental? Transcendental means there are three aspects to it. It is beyond space, time, and causality. This is one thing which we have to remember very carefully. Transcendent means what? It means it is beyond space, time, and causality. Whereas all manifestation is in space, time, and causality only. That means the Brahman is beyond space, time, and causality. So you can't find a cause for Brahman. You can't by definition, you are prevented from putting the question, how did Brahman come about? Where did it originate? Because it was always there. Something which is infinite and eternal and beyond space and time, one cannot put the question when, how, where, why, and all these things. These become irrelevant by definition. So Atman is also essentially beyond space and time and causality, but when associated with ignorance and when it is embodied, it becomes Jiva, or sometimes called as even Jivatma, and the whole drama proceeds from there. The whole drama now proceeds from there, because the starting point itself is we are already in ignorance and we are already embodied. So this is the Atman Brahman relationship, and what are the aspects of both Atman and Brahman? As I mentioned, that they are beyond space, time, and causality. This is something which we have to understand very clearly. And as I mentioned, Atman when embodied becomes Jiva. Brahman when associated with Maya becomes Ishvara. Is this idea clear? I hope, because deliberately you are all muted, I'm not getting any response from you, but I would like to you to understand the essential part of this. Atman, when involved in ignorance and embodied, becomes Jiva. Right? Brahman, when an aspect of it is associated with Maya, becomes Ishvara. So Ishvara is, as I mentioned earlier, is the link between the Jiva and the Brahman. The Ishvara helps you to dissociate yourself with ignorance and embodiment, which are born out of avidya and with the help of Maya, involved in the whole scheme of manifestation through the three gunas. So the Ishvara helps you to get rid of this and connects you to Brahman. So this is the beautiful scheme on which it works. So this is the fundamental point. Now, how do we define avidya? Avidya is defined as it is what conjures up the multiplicity of the relative world. Ignorance, what does it do? It creates this idea of multiplicity in the relative world. That is the function of avidya. Whereas, what exactly is the reality? The reality is the unity of Atman and Brahman, the oneness of Atman and Brahman. That is the reality. What does Maya do? It creates avidya through what we have already discussed as the Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Maya has got these two Shaktis or two powers. Avarana Shakti. That means it has that, it veils the truth, it covers the truth. Covering it is not sufficient. Covering the truth is only one aspect of it. Projecting the untruth is the other aspect of it. Covering the reality and projecting the unreality or the falseness, that is the Vikshepa Shakti. Vikshepa literally means throwing or casting or projecting. That is the reason why the world is considered as something elusive or illusionary. In the sense, it's only a projection, but not sitting here. While we are involved in ignorance, it is real for us. In fact, the Brahman is unreal for us. The Atman is unreal for us. The world is real for us because of the involvement in ignorance. This is the whole problem. This is how it goes about. So, this is the background based on which we are going to take up the study of Atma Bodha. Today we will take up only one shloka, the very first shloka, and I'll just share the screen. Yes. Are you able to see this? This is an interesting, I've taken it from the website. I would like to gratefully acknowledge the International Vedanta Mission, who have this soft copy. And I think Meena ji has got the hard copy she has shown earlier. That is the book called Atma Bodha. And this is the very first verse of it. And very interestingly, for some of you who are comfortable with Hindi, they have given briefly the Hindi translation and also the English translation of it. But I would like you to again, try to not give too much of importance to the English words, because I'll be talking about these things in a much more elaborate manner, so that we get to the deeper meaning of these words. Okay. Now the very first shloka says.
Krishnapani-ji?
Yes.
Can you please just make it full screen?
It is.
Screen.
Yeah. This is in actually PDF form.
Oh.
Okay. Is it okay now?
No, I think the previous was better.
Okay, this is better.
Little smaller, because then we could read all three.
Okay, this is better.
Yes. Yes.
We are able to read all the three.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So this very first verse says, Tapobhihi Kshina Papanam Shantanam Vitaraginam Mumukshunam Apekshoyam Atmabodho Vidhiyate. The author says that I am composing Atma Bodha, this treatise of knowledge of the self, for those who have purified themselves by austerities and are peaceful in heart and calm, who are free from cravings and are desirous of liberation. That means he is already taking it for granted that whoever is coming for a study of Atma Bodha has purified himself through austerities. Tapobhihi, the plural is used, not simply tapas, but tapobhihi is the plural. What is it? Through that tapas, one has attenuated all his sins or flaws or deficiencies or defects in oneself. Kshina papanam. Kshina means one which have been attenuated, which have been substantially reduced, almost near elimination of all papa. Papa is evil or sin, or a more better term would be flaws and defects in one's own character and one's own being. Then Shantanam, those who are in a state of peace. Vitaraginam, that means who have got rid of all their cravings, all the colorings. Raga means colored vision or color basically. Vitaraga means you have a transparent being now. All cravings are, in traditional terms, what we call as Vairagya. One who has reached a sufficiently high state of vairagya, vitaraga, and he has an ardent desire or ardent sense of urgency for liberation. Mumukshunam. Now, Atma Bodha is given for these persons. Now, it is for each one of us to decide whether we are qualified enough to study Atma Bodha or not. Personally, I can tell you very clearly that I am not really qualified to study the Atma Bodha because we are, at least I am yet to get rid of all the flaws and defects, become more peaceful and calm, be transparent and free of cravings, and have that sense of urgency for liberation. The point I am trying to make it is that this is the preparation that is required for a study, practice, and deeper understanding of Atma Bodha. That is the reason why the Upanishads very clearly say Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasa. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says Atma va are drashtavyaha, shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavyaha. You have to attentively listen and deeply contemplate on it and go into a state of meditation in order to understand the truth of one's own self. This is the reason why lot of preparation is required. This also serves as an inspiration for us in order to become austere in one's life, to be attenuated, to be in a state where most of the deficiencies, defects, flaws, and evil tendencies in us have almost become dormant. Once they become dormant, there is a sense of serenity, there is a sense of peace and calm. And there is also a great relief from most of the cravings. That creates a great sense of urgency to realize the truth and be liberated from illusion and sorrow, shoka, moha, and shoka. This is the basic idea behind it. Now, what does tapas mean? I have mentioned earlier that tapas, the word come from tapa is to burn, which means you have to burn away everything that is inessential. Everything that is inessential from a spiritual perspective has to be totally burnt away and converted into ashes. That is the fundamental etymological meaning of the word tapas. Now, very interestingly, if you refer to the Bhagavad Gita, the chapter 17, verses 14, 15, and 16, very beautifully tell us what is tapas. Tapas from the point of view of action or body, tapas from the point of view of speech or word, and tapas from the point of view of thought or mind. These are the things. That means the antahkarana shuddhi, thought, word, and deed. There has to be purity at this level. And how do we go about with that? And what is called as tapas from the bodily point of view, from the point of view of speech, and from the point of view of one's own thoughts? This we'll just go into it because this is very, very important to understand from a traditional perspective also as to what tapas means. And in these verses of the Bhagavad Gita, it is defined or elaborated as follows. Deva Dvija Guru Prajna Pujanam Shaucham Arjavam Brahmacharya Mahimsa cha Shariram Tapa Uchyate. 5 aspects are dealt with here. The reverence or respect to be shown to devas, to the twice born, to the preceptors and the wise men. Deva, Dvija, Guru, Prajna Pujanam is the one aspect out of the 5. This is the first aspect. Showing great reverence and respect and devotion to devas, to the divine forces in action. Deva, I have already described, mentioned several times earlier. Please remember again. Deva means the shining ones. Divyate anena iti devaha. Deva means a shining one. That means it is a representation of the manifestation of a particular type of energy. Each Deva represents a particular type of energy. So Deva and energy, according to the Upanishads, they are one and the same. Whenever we say Deva, it is not the gods or demigods or all the types of gods which we worship. All the gods whom we worship are again representatives of that energy, symbolic representatives of the energy they manifest. But essentially Deva means energy. The divine forces operating in manifestation and in nature are Deva. Then Dvija. Dvija means one who is born twice. A physical birth is the first birth. But being born into wisdom, one becoming a realized person, he is born once again. There is what is called as a resurrection. He is born again into wisdom, into that state of self-realization. That person is called as a Dvija. Generally, this is used as a term synonymous with Brahmana. Again, Brahmana does not refer to any caste or community, or it is not a privilege by birth. It is something one acquires through one's own sadhana and becomes a self-realized person. Such a person only is called as a Brahmana. That's very clearly mentioned in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I have quoted this earlier also. I'll not go into it, but basically, one who has realized the imperishable truth is called as a Brahmana. One who has realized Brahman is called as a Brahmana. Then Guru. Whoever is a preceptor, whoever is an elderly person, a person from whom one learns is called a Guru. And Prajna. Prajna is one who has Prajna. Prajna is that wisdom. So a Prajna is somebody who is wise and who is also a realized person. So showing reverence to all these 4 persons or 4 aspects which are represented by the terms Deva, Dvija, Guru and Prajna is bodily, first aspect of bodily tapas. Then Shaucham. Shaucha means purity. Purity of all bodies. All the set of bodies. Purity of body is Shaucha. Arjavam. Arjavam means, Ruju means straightforward. Ruju means being straightforward, guileless, not trying to be very smart or trying to be cunning from a worldly point of view. Being straightforward, being guileless. That is what is the meaning of the term Arjava. So 3 now. Reverence to the 4 aspects I have mentioned. Number 1. Shaucha is 2nd. Arjava is 3rd. Brahmacharya is 4th. Brahmacharya is continence from a bodily point of view also, but it also means all action oriented towards the realization of Brahman. Charya means action. All action oriented towards the Brahman is Brahmacharya. And the 5th aspect is Ahimsa. Totally harmless. Totally devoid of violence in any form. So these are the 5 aspects, and the shloka says these are Shariram tapauchyate. This is tapas of the body or set of bodies. This is the first aspect of tapas from the bodily aspect of it. Now see another 5 aspects which are related to speech. Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat Swadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vangmayam tapauchyate. Anudvegakaram. Anudvegakaram means it should not be offensive or disturbing. What? Our speech. Our speech should not be causing anxiety, causing disturbance, causing offense to anybody. Number 1. Then Satyam, truth. Priyam is good or pleasing. Priyam is pleasing. Hitam is what is beneficial. And Swadhyayabhyasanam, it is the habitual reading of scriptures, constantly continuing to study the scriptures. Speech is to be used for repeating. You know why Vedas are always rendered aloud. You do the Vedic rendition in a loud voice. It purifies speech. And you will have also the benefit of the wisdom that is imparted through the recitation of the scriptures. So again, you have these 5 aspects of speech being not offensive, truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and for the recitation of the scriptures. This is called as Vangmayam tapauchyate, tapas of the speech. See the beauty of it. So these 5 aspects constitute the tapas of the speech. Then we come to the thought aspect of it. This verse says, Manah prasadaha saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava samshuddhirityetat tapo manasamuchyate. Manah prasadaha. Manah prasadaha means serenity of the mind. Serenity of the mind. Manah prasada. Prasada, as I mentioned, refers to clarity, lucidity, limpidity. So we should have that clarity in one's own mind, which gives what is called as calmness, or prasada confers prasannata. Prasada or clarity gives us prasannata. Prasannata means being of a very serene disposition. Then the second one is saumyatvam. Saumya, gentleness. If we carefully examine our own personality and our own being, we find that most of the crudeness, most of the rough nature of a person originates in the thought. So there it is important to be gentle. So that is saumyatva. Then maunam, silence of the mind. It is not silence of the speech. Mauna he did not mention when he is talking about the tapas of the vak or speech. He is talking about mental silence. Then atma vinigraha, complete self-control. The mind should not be running here and there with all kinds of thoughts scattered and dispersed, and dissipation of energy. And finally, the fifth aspect is bhava samshuddhi, extreme emotional purity. Extreme emotional purity. Bhava samshuddhi. These five aspects constitute tapaha manasamuchyate. This is mental purity or purity of thought. See, this is what is called as antahkarana shuddhi. I have been right from the beginning insisting upon understanding the whole spiritual dimension and orienting action for only two purposes. One is purity, the other is exhaustion of karma. Purity and exhaustion of karma. Nothing beyond this. Purity in all forms at all levels. At thought, word, and deed. So at all levels, the most important aspect is purity, which is burning away all that is inessential or all that is unwanted, and that is what is really meant by being austere. Austere does not mean wearing a loin cloth or having only two pairs of clothes. Austerity is a state of mind. Austerity is a state of behavior. Austerity is a state of being. And that should reflect in everything. See, this sense of purity itself brings about frugality. One would behave with a great sense of responsibility and use anything that the world provides to the minimum aspect in a very optimal manner. No extravaganza, no nothing excess. So all that is simply gone. So that is what is meant by austerity or tapas. This is a very important thing to be remembered. See, this is the very first word of Atma Bodha. Tapobhi kshina papanam. Unless we understand what tapas means. See, it is so contemporary, isn't it? If you look at nothing religious is there, nothing pertaining to rituals, nothing pertaining to performance of any yajnas or yagas or any elaborate rituals in any form. What is it there that is being asked of us? To be reverential, to be clean, to be straightforward, to be continent, to be non-violent, to speak in a manner which does not cause anxiety or offense or disturbance to anybody. It should be truthful, it should be good, it should be beneficial, it should be pleasing, and it should be used for recitation of the scriptures. Speech. Similarly, there should be a great sense of serenity, gentleness, silence, self-control, and extreme purity of all our emotions. Now, this is so contemporary, and anybody at any time, in any situation, can adopt and start practicing. One can start practicing without any problem at all once we understand the true meaning and purpose of tapas. True meaning and purpose of tapas is to be understood. And see, very interestingly, again in the 18th chapter, he talks about the same thing. The 18th and the last chapter of Gita talks about the 5 factors which are involved in anything good or bad we do. Whatever a person understands by his body, speech and mind, whether right or wrong, then this is verse number 14 of the 18th chapter. Clearly, his aspects that are involved, adhishthanam. Adhishthanam means the physical body, the body which we have. This is the seat. This is the seat of the Atman. This is the seat of the divinity in us. That's called as adhishthanam. Then karta. Karta is the agent, the doer. Then the third one is what is called as karanam. Karanam cha prathak vidam, different instruments of action, like hands, feet, mouth, all these instruments of action. Karanam. Vividhascha prathak cheshta. Vividhascha prathak cheshta is the functions of the vital energies within the body. We that different energies operate in the body through the pranas, and they are the give the energy required for performing an action. Finally, the term Daivam is used. What does this term represent here? All that is beyond the human being, all that non-human factor, which we sometimes call as providence, the internal factors or elements which the divine force provides us. That is why the terms like luck, destiny, fate, all these things come about. All these are classified under Daivam. See, Daivam is only one aspect of the 5. You can't leave everything to fate or luck or chance or destiny or anything like that. It is only one aspect of the 5 factors which are required for any action. And Radhakrishnan very beautifully says that Daivam or providence represents the non-human factor that interferes and disposes of human effort. It is wise, all-seeing will is at work in the world. In all human actions, accountable element which is called fate or the acts of past lives. It is called here as Daiva. The task of man is to drop a pebble into the pond of time. People touch the different distant shore. We may plant the seed but may not see the harvest which lies in hands higher grown. Daiva, or the superpersonal fate, is the general cosmic necessity, the resultant of all that has happened in the past, which rules unnoticed. It works in the individual for its own incalculable processes and purposes. So these are associated with thought, word, and deed. These 5 aspects. Again, I'll just very briefly recapitulate. Adhishthanam refers to the seat, which represents the physical body. Then the karta, the agent or the doer. Then karanam, the instrument action. Then the 4th one is the different energies, which are called as pruthak cheshtha. And finally, an element of daivam, or the divine element, which is a cosmic necessity, and the cosmic energies in play, which allow us to evolve through our karma. See, the beauty of the whole thing, one has to understand the implications of this. Why tapas is necessary, and what are all the factors that are involved in our thought, word, and deed, whatever we do. This is the beautiful correlation which we have to establish when we are studying any subject. It's not simply Atma Bodha for the first verse and the English translation may appear to be very simple and clear, but there is so much depth in it, and that is the reason why we need great men to write commentaries on it and give us the depth of the meaning and the correlation with several factors, like what is given in the Bhagavad Gita. What does tapas mean from the point of view of Bhagavad Gita? Tapas of the body, tapas of the speech, tapas of the mind. All these factors are to be very carefully understood so that we get to know the depth of it, the seriousness of it, and the implications of it. This is the reason. One, if we do not know the seriousness of it or the implications of it, most of the time we find that we have there is no spiritual progress at all. There's absolutely no spiritual progress. Nothing is moving, nothing is happening. Why is it that nothing is happening? Because we do not know the depth of the action which we have to take and the levels of action that are involved in it. That is what is important. The failure is not an account of anything else except but the lack of seriousness and intensity in us, whereby we remain where we are, maybe for lives together. How many lives we don't know. It may take several lives. We're absolutely unconscious of it. We are absolutely unprepared for it. Unless we take ourselves in hand and then have that tremendous energy, the tremendous sense of urgency. That's what I normally translate mumukshutva not as a desire for liberation, but that sense of urgency for change, urgency for transformation, urgency for being free from the mess into which we are, into this bondage and sorrow, bondage and suffering. That is the implication of this verse. So we can understand what is the level of preparation that is required in order to study Atma Bodha and practically implement in one's own life. This should not deter us. It should not be daunting. It should actually strengthen our determination and give us inspiration. Oh, no. Whatever you are talking, sir, it seems to be too much for me. You're asking too many things to start with. So I don't have any of these things, and let me come prepared one by one. I'll take up purity at one level, and straightforwardness at another level, and talking speaking truth at a different level, and then becoming serene in the mind. No, it's not. To be, if 15 aspects are given, doesn't mean that we attack one by one. It's a We have to attack the whole thing. We have to focus our attention on all the things simultaneously, because you can't start one by one, and then reach the goal. It is not a step by step thing. It's a quantum leap. It's a quantum leap into a different dimension altogether. That quantum leap can happen only when you have that escape velocity. You build up that energy to such a level. The escape velocity from the Earth's gravitation force is something around 12 kilometers per second. So that makes it how many kilometers per minute? 12 into 60. That's about 720 kilometers per minute into 60. That much of velocity per kilometers per hour. That should be the speed in order to escape from this the gravitational force of the Earth. From a spiritual point of view also, we are stuck in this spatio-temporal framework. In order to go into a dimension which is timeless, which is beyond space, time and causation, one needs that tremendous sense of urgency and energy. That is what is implied here. That is the reason why I said Tattva Bodha gives us an intellectual appreciation only, whereas Atma Bodha gives us that intuitive appreciation of the urgency and the intensity with which one needs to approach this subject. The approach to this subject itself should be with that great intensity and urgency. Otherwise, it will not lead us anywhere. We will be continuing our study this way, one by one. We'll take up these things, maybe another 14, 15 weeks or so, whatever it is, 2-3 months we spend, and we feel the kind of complacency and feeling, I did the Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha both. How does it matter? How does it matter? Does it matter in any way if we have just read it and left it at that? If we haven't brought about any radical transformation in us in any manner whatsoever? Unfortunately, what has happened is spiritual pursuit has also become a pastime for many of us. It makes us feel superior in a false sense. In a false way, it makes us feel superior. Yeah, I am now into spiritual study. I am now oriented spiritually. That's a false sense of superiority. It's not for showing it to somebody. That is the reason why right from the beginning I have been saying number is of no consequence. Whether 2 people attend or 10 people attend or 100 people attend, it is of no consequence. If I do not change, and if that change change does not inspire somebody to change, it's an exercise in futility. It's an exercise in total futility, and in one way it will be a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. See, what is important is, unfortunately, most of us, I think, participants, except a few who have not crossed 60, but most of us who are 60 and above have got greater urgency. Greater urgency. Not that it is not urgent for others, but see, you have to do it when you are alive. And you have to come back again and again and again and again into the same thing in order to go through this process. So wisdom dictates to us that nothing else should be of any importance, and this should be the only priority. Because, see, he is putting conditions. He has put 5 conditions here. He has 4 conditions essentially. Tapobhi kshina papanam. One who has attenuated and purified himself to a great extent through tapas. Shantanam, those who are in a peaceful state. Vitaraginam, those who are free from all kinds of cravings. And those who have an urgent sense of radical transformation, which will lead to freedom from what I have repeatedly said as shoka and moha, or bondage and suffering. So these are the things which we should already be in possession of it, or having realized the importance of it and having done substantial sadhana. Only for such people Atma Bodha is being given by him. Because the author knows, Adi Shankaracharya knows very well that unless you are otherwise prepared for it, this is of no consequence to you. This text has been there for the past 1200 years. What is so great about it now? It is important because one has to go on a journey of self-discovery and self-awareness. Atma Bodha essentially means that. One has to come to that. If one doesn't come to it, we have lost the essence of it. We have lost the taste of it. We have lost the flavor of it. We have lost the beauty of it. It is something so precious. A beautiful, valuable diamond is given to us and we have simply thrown it away as a piece of stone. That's what that should be the sense of our urgency. Otherwise, it doesn't help us. Unless I have that sense of urgency, I will not transform. I will not do any action oriented towards this at all. I'll go back after sir, good 1 hour, 1.5 hour study on Sunday morning, sir. That's fine. We are all very happy about it, and then go back to our own work and do our own things in our own manner. That have we brought about any change at any level to understand the real meaning of tapas? To understand the real meaning of what is to be at peace with oneself, devoid of all cravings, and with that sense of urgency. That is the essential aspect that is being conveyed as a preparatory thing in the very first shloka of Atma Bodha. Atma Bodha doesn't start with an invocation or incantation or salutation or anything like that. Directly in the very first verse, he is attacking the subject matter. But let us not waste time. Come to it. I am talking about this subject to 1, 2, 3, 4 people who have got these 4 qualifications. That's all. As simple as that. Now, it is for each one of us to decide whether we are sufficiently qualified to pursue this study. This is the import of the very first shloka of Atma Bodha. This is what is important, and this is how we need to proceed. I'll stop, and then if there are some questions, I hope there are questions, and I hope we have a serious discussion so that we can get much more clarity about it. So I'll stop sharing this screen. Stop sharing, and then go back to our Yes, sir. Any questions? Shall we start with some discussion on this whatever I have covered? I hope I have not created panic amongst the participants and created a sense of fear. It's not for that, but it is good if there is that sense of panic and fear in us from a spiritual perspective. From a spiritual perspective, it is important to be panicked, to be terribly disturbed, so that we shed all the things which are unnecessary. I should thank all the participants and others also, especially Beenaji and others.
COVID has given us all a very good opportunity.
Yeah.
Not only to listen to you and through various webinars, but then take a resolution to practice these austerities because we have nothing else to do now.
Yes. That's good in one way. But as I said, see, personally also it is good for me because for the past week, 1 week, I was forced to do a lot of study. That's a good thing. Yes, I know left to myself, I am a lazy person, but you are the people who inspire me and conspire against me to study. Because that gives great insight into these things. It gives great insight into several aspects of it. And I had read the Atma Bodha earlier with the Sanskrit commentary and other things, but it was so many things were greatly, great revelations, great insights have come about by spending a lot of time on this. So that's one beneficial aspect as far as I am concerned. Beena Janaki Ramji says the common teaching across religions. Yes, there's nothing. See, nothing religious at all. I wouldn't call it as religion at all. It is simply an awakening to the divinity in us. Salvation is not a reward for good things we have done. So none of us can boast about it, for it is by grace we have been saved through faith and wisdom of Lord. So Beenaji says, KK, thank you so much. I have to leave. Janaki will go. Okay, right, fine. No, that's not a problem. Annapurna Anupamaji, is Atma Bodha and Nididhyasa similar? No. See, Atma Bodha essentially refers to self-awareness. Nididhyasa is a process. See, Nididhyasa, it is in that three aspects that are given. First is Shravana, Manana, and then Nididhyasa. Nididhyasa in some manner can be equated to what is called as a Samadhi state. Bodha is a subject dealing with self-awareness. It means it essentially means self-awareness. That's being aware of oneself. It requires a process, and that process involves Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasa, or in the terminology of Raja Yoga, it is called as Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. Samadhi is a state of being, state of consciousness, supra consciousness, as sometimes it is called as. Okay. Krishnamurti ji, can you mute yourself? Your microphone is on. Krishnamurti, KC Krishnamurti. Yeah. Then are devas mentioned in Vedas like Indra, Agni, Varuna, Vayu, etc. or some sort? Yeah, they are all energies only. Indra represents electricity. Agni represents fire or heat. Varuna represents water. Vayu, represents air. So these are all symbolic representations of various forces of nature and in manifestation. Okay. See Krishnamurti, I think there is some disturbance. It has to be muted. I don't know, maybe he doesn't know how to mute it. Anyway, you could kindly mute your microphone. Thank you. Yeah, because sorry, because of because being recorded, it sometimes gives a lot of disturbance. So any further questions on this? I'm expecting more questions because this is something to be done practically, something very practical, and one has to take it up with that immediacy.
Maybe next Sunday you will have more questions because we need time to think over.
No problem at all. No problem at all. What I am trying to, at least I hope I have tried to convey the necessity of that urgency and intensity.
Yes, very well. Ma Manisa used to stress that. All of us who have attended our programs know that.
Yeah. Because otherwise, see, again it is switched on. Okay. Mr. Ramachandran is there. I don't see. Yeah. I'm happy to see so many. Yes. Meenaji?
Sir, you're rightly saying we have to have firm conviction and also be determined to do onto this.
Urgency.
It's the urgency. We have to go on to this path. Then we have to do the tap. We have to carry on with our studies and do
yes.
All the
yes. On a daily basis.
Self-control. We have to.
On a daily basis, it has to be, one has to go into deep contemplation.
Yes.
And look at all these things very carefully.
Very carefully. We have to be serious about it.
Yeah.
Very true, sir. Thank you.
See, the challenge here is there is no measure available. No, that is the whole problem.
No, you see, measure is a wrong term actually, because we are still stuck in that spatio-temporal framework. If you are looking for a measure, you are looking for a measure, you are stuck there. You are stuck. See, what is the measure for goodness? Where is the measure for goodness? Where is the measure for truth?
We benchmark people, no?
No, what?
Both
what kind
living
of
as well as
See,
mythological characters.
No. See, the benchmark.
Like Harishchandra is the measure for truth.
No, but that is only a symbolic thing meant for inspiring people to be truthful. But can there be a measure for truth? I remember a very beautiful Urdu couplet, which says, "Sach बढ़े या घटे तो सच नहीं रहता, झूठ की कोई इंतहा ही नहीं." See, truth is truth. You cannot increase it or decrease it. But falsehood, when it comes to falsehood, there is no limit. Falsehood can be anything. Anything can be the measure of it. Neither of them are measurable that way. Measurement is with oneself. How was I yesterday and how am I today? And along with that sense of urgency and intensity, one other fundamental aspect that is required for our purpose is taking ourselves into hand and becoming extremely responsible. I would stress upon that, because Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say that you are responsible for the entire world, because you are the world. You are no different from the world in any manner whatsoever. So I should be willing to take up that great responsibility. If I have the tremendous responsibility, then the necessity for transformation will also come about. So don't look at anything from the point of view of a matrix, because that would be a limiting factor. But as I said, one measure for myself could be that have I at least taken one step in the right direction as compared to what I was yesterday. It is one step in the right direction. That's what it is required. So it's already 11:30. Can you let us know about Sangam Yuga, and are we? I don't understand this. Okay, let me read the chat. Can you let us know about Sangam Yuga? Are we now in the Yuga and Kali Yuga will start? No. This forget about this. All these yugas, madam. See, these are of no consequence at all. See, we are alive today, and we have that need for change. What kind of yoga is there? Who talks about which yoga? Which is coming to which end? When will this end and when will that start? See, if you are looking at purely from the astronomical calculations part of it, there are very authentic statements which say that Kali Yuga has started in 3102 BC. So 3102 plus 2020 brings us to 5122. So it is only 5122 years have passed in the Kali Yuga, which is called as the 28th Kali Yuga in the Vaivasvata Manvantara out of 71. The total number of Yuga, Mahayugas in one Manvantara is 71. This is the 28th. And the total length of the Kali Yuga itself is 432,000 years. Out of 432,000 years, we have only come to the almost the end of 5,121 years only. So imagine there is still another 4,27,000 and odd years to be carried out. So how does it matter? Time, as I said, if you are looking at it from the point of view of space and time, it is irrelevant for our purpose. It has nothing to do with anybody. It has nothing to do with anybody in any manner whatsoever. The transformation has to come in me, and it has to come now. There is no postponement of it. Yeah. Brahman and Maya is Ishvara. This statement needs further elaboration to see clarity. Sir, Dr. Sana, the point that made out is that aspect of Vedanta is provided for. Ishvara is called as the Lord. Ishvara, the word itself means Lord. Lord of what? Lord of a manifestation in a particular setup. Now, Ishvara has a flexibility manifestation. And it has been defined as an entity involved in manifestation because it has to guide manifestation, number one. But by itself, how does it get involved? It creates another dimension called as Maya, and then gets involved in the whole process. If you see the Bhagavad Gita we have read earlier, he says, Sri Krishna says, I am the creator of that Maya also. Mama Maya. It is my Maya that is in operation. That means I am responsible for that Maya also. As I said, if we catch hold of these words too strictly, there is a possibility of being misinterpreted or misled. The only point that is being made is that the Atman is no different from the Brahman in any respect, except that when the Atman is stuck in ignorance and gets embodied, it creates a sense of differentiation in itself. Now, having got stuck in this manifestation, the need to cross over is important. There is an urgent need for crossing over or overcoming this ignorance. Now, in this process, Ishvara as a tattva is introduced to understand that he is responsible for the entire manifestation. He is a functionary responsible for all the manifestation that is happening, which he performs through the Trimurtis, through the Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara aspects of it. He performs those actions. Therefore, in order to understand Brahman, the help of Ishvara is required because he is the crossover point. He is the crossover point. You cross Maya and come to that point from where there is a quantum leap into the timeless dimension beyond space, time, and causation. It's only a representative thing. If you go purely by the Upanishadic these things, Upanishads do not have any Ishvara. There is no concept about Ishvara in the Upanishads anywhere. In fact, they don't even talk about what is brought about later on as Paramatma. There is no Paramatma. There is only Atman and Brahman. That's all. No third entity is required. The Atman, devoid of its ignorance, is Brahman. The Atman, stuck in ignorance, is the Jivatma or the Jiva. It's as simple as that. The logic there is much more clear and simple, but from a point of view of understanding manifestation, it is important to this idea of Ishvara was brought into the whole scheme of things. Only as a crossover point, you can call that. It's again a symbolic representation. Everything from our point of view are only words. They are only words. Yeah. As Janaki Ramji says, it's a simpler way for ease of understanding. From form, God is Ishvara and formless is Brahman. Yeah, you can say that in a very simple terms. In very simple terms, what we generally talk about God, because God is also not with the same kind of things, but it is the manifested representation of the Brahman is what we call as Ishvara. That's all. So, we need not dwell too much on this aspect also, because we will get into academic philosophy and scholastic discussions by trying to split hairs about the Atman, Ishvara and Brahman. But as I said, it's a beautiful representation that is made in the whole scheme of Vedanta. Okay, I hope there is some clarity.
Thank you. I think it is beyond 11 o'clock there now. We appreciate your presence.
Yes.
So we should let you go to sleep, I think, now.
Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you
so
much.
On behalf of School of Ancient Wisdom and all the participants, of course, it's not necessary for Krishnapani Kesaraju, but we thank you wholeheartedly for giving a very good clarity on the distinction between Tattva Bodha and Atma Bodha, and also making us motivated to really go on an intuitive sadhana and process for as you rightly put, not just knowledge, but realization and experience is important. I am sure with your support and with the support of Satsangis, all of us will embark on this journey.
Yes.
So we look forward to your next talk on Sunday, and by that time I request participants also to send your questions if there are any. You can directly send to Krishnapani Kesaraju through WhatsApp also.
And my small humble request is to go through the Tattvabodha, these things to some extent to get much more clarity. Because study is basically.
Yeah, in fact, these are available. I have already downloaded.
Yeah, yes.
Both are free downloads are available.
Yeah, so one can go through them. So because we tend to forget, we tend to forget what all discussions we had and what are all the so important aspects can be noted down, so that becomes easy for us. So that would be helpful. And again, my humble request is let us be on time, and then we can start the program on time. That's one of the fundamental spiritual disciplines required. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I request Malati Janakaram to conclude the function.
Oh, yes.
We'll conclude, of course, as usual, with Loka Samasta. Thank you, Mr. Krishnapani. And all of you, please mute your microphones and sing along. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
So hope to see you all on Thursday evening.
Thank you, Krishnapani ji. We have taken a lot of your time.